Hey everyone, it's Tim. Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, I am a science fiction and fantasy author, and I have written the Dragon in the White series, the novella Eggs in Two Baskets, and the forthcoming children's book, Goodnight Phobos, Goodnight Deimos, which is my first one, and it's coming out in a couple months, and I'm excited to share it with you. If you're a returning viewer, thanks for coming back. Today I'd like to talk to you about book reviews, and depending on where you fit in the literary process, your opinion of book reviews will go over a wide spectrum. If you're just a reader, if you're a buyer for a library or a bookstore, or if you're an author yourself, your usage and thoughts on book reviews are going to vary widely. Today I'm going to go over basically how they're useful, how you should approach them if you're an author reading them, how you should utilize them if you are a reader and you're trying to help other people enjoy the book that you read, that you enjoyed, and you want to share that experience with them. And then I'm going to kind of go over what I post and what I don't post for basically the author's own mental health being and not wanting to scare other people away from reading the book themselves. So if you're a person on the internet, you've obviously seen reviews, and I hope you've left reviews because they are very useful if left in a constructive manner. So to begin, just to refresh, review is typically at least a rating system, typically 1 to 5 stars, and then most of them have an accompanying comment section that you can leave. Depending on what it is and what my opinion of it is, I will leave either one or both. If it's like some consumer good that I bought on Amazon or something like that, and I don't think it really needs a written review for somebody to read it, I'll typically just leave 4 or 5 stars, whatever I think it is. But for a book, I typically always try to leave a comment because I want there to be some sort of constructive criticism, thought, story behind why I gave it the ranking number that I did, so that if it's the author reading it or if it's somebody who needs to utilize that data, they have more rationale behind it. So typically what I like to do is, if I didn't like the book at all, I will not leave a review, especially if it's in the 1 to 2 star rating in my mind. At that point, it's kind of, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. A 1 star review can just really crush somebody, especially if they're an indie author. I mean, if there's some big time author who has 20,000 reviews on a book, your 1 star review is just going to be a small data point in there that counts as an outlier and will probably get ranked out of there or something anyways. But if you're a small time indie author and you have maybe 5, 6 reviews and somebody gives you a 1, that's going to tank your average and probably convince the person to not write anymore. Especially if you didn't like it for that reason, there's probably something either personal that you didn't like about it, or maybe they're just still learning the craft. I don't think they really need to see that 1 star review. It's not helping anybody. And definitely don't go and email them and say hey, here's what you should have done differently in your book, because there's a good chance it's not going to come through as constructively as you think it's going to. Authors belong to workshops. They have beta readers, alpha readers, they have editors, they have family members who are reading through things. Trust me, it's seen a lot of eyes. If it was going to be improved before I got to publishing, it would have done so. If I liked it, but I thought it maybe had some room to grow, I'll leave a 3 star review, and then typically say, maybe oh, the book was really great. I had a hard time getting through the slower character development in the beginning during the world building, but I liked the story overall. Still definitely a great read. Give it a try if you like fantasy set in this realm. I'll try to say something like that, because then it's constructive to the author. It still shows the reader of the review that it might be worth their time if they like X, Y, and Z. And that maybe if they don't, then maybe they'll just stay away from it themselves, and your rating doesn't completely screw up their average. It's right down the middle. So, but then if I really liked it, I'll obviously give it a 4 or 5 star. 5 to me basically means that it's perfect. I didn't really think anything else needed to change. And then, it doesn't really need a ton to go behind it. You could just literally say, awesome book, highly recommended. If you want to help the author out even more, give a little bit more of a reasoning behind why you thought it was awesome. If it was one of my books, you could say, I really loved how Tim captured the imagery of New England, or I love dragon stories set in the real world. You could say things like that, because then that makes the author feel good that you actually read the book and that you picked up all those things, and that now you're helping potential future readers also maybe grab onto it because they might like the same things. If I thought it was pretty good, but maybe had some room for improvement, I'll leave a 4 and very gently state why. Maybe I thought it was not a 5. But you don't want to crush the hopes and dreams of the author, and you don't want to scare away anybody. A book that doesn't have a ton of press and not a ton of buzz is already getting some, whether it's negative treatment or just not being spread around, it's already being heard enough. You don't need to go on there and say this book sucks. Don't read this book ever. It's terrible. So yeah, that's kind of how I recommend utilizing it. So I don't know if you've left reviews yourself, and if you kind of adhere to anything that I'm saying, but leave a note down in the comments and we can have a discussion about it, because everybody has a different opinion of why you'd use them and what their benefit is. So as a segue to that, let's go over who uses reviews and why. So kind of the big one is the authors themselves. So I know as an author, I like to look at reviews and see what people liked and didn't like, because it helps me better understand who my readers are and what they're looking for, what I put into my writing effort and it was picked up by said reader, and maybe what they wanted more of. So I know sometimes people state in my first book, The Dragon and the Whites, that it was a little slow in the beginning because what I tried to do was develop this world and establish the characters and establish this backstory that would unfold later on. It was my first book. I didn't really know how to go about it as well as I should have. So if I had written the book again today, I would have slightly tweaked the order that I gave the reader some of the information. The information still would have been there, just potentially in a different order. I might have had later in the book, one of the characters maybe thinks back to something that happened, or maybe you do a dream sequence or something. Instead, I kind of have the first third of the book be a lot of development and you ramp up into it. I don't necessarily think it's bad the way I did it, but it's maybe not the way I would do it now 4 years later after I've been doing this for a little bit. I just finished my 5th book now, so obviously I like to think I'm a better writer than I was 4 years ago, but everybody has a different way that they progress. So some people have pointed that kind of thing out, and it helped a lot because I like to think that in my 2nd book, my 3rd book, my 4th book, I took those things to heart and tried to refine them in my writing process, because if somebody read my 1st book, they obviously believed in me and wanted to read more of my works. So if they're going to be a return customer and they took the time to point out why something might be different to make it better, I want to make sure I utilize that information. The second type of people who are using it are basically librarians and bookstore owners. So, if you run a big store like a Barnes & Noble or something, you have industry periodicals, you have management, somebody telling you from on high at corporate what you should be putting on the store shelves and for a period of time, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're a small indie store, and as of the taping of this is National Indie Book Day, so if you're not already supporting independent bookstores, I highly recommend you get out there. You really can't get that same experience of going through a brick and mortar store in your neighborhood and browsing all the shelves. But that takes a lot of work, and it takes a bookstore owner to kind of go through thousands of books that are coming out every month and try to figure out what one they should take up the 6 inches of shelf space on their book, but the bookshelves, and what will sell and what won't. And the way they do that is, whether it's through Kirkus or Publishers Weekly or any of the other different kind of industry standards that do book reviews, write-ups, marketing, ad agencies pushing out new books being released, they have a lot of information coming at them. So any kind of review that they're seeing, whether it's from a paid source, non-paid, customer leaving reviews, all these things are going to help them figure out what's value added to add to their shelves and what they should maybe leave off for the time being. Librarians are working the same way, but they have even a smaller budget typically, so they have to be even more choosy. And then the third group are basically readers themselves. So if you're an avid reader, you're probably using Goodreads, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any other kind of major sites to either purchase, read, leave reviews, research, and having those reviews there are helpful for you to figure out what's worth your hard-earned money to buy and then actually invest the time into reading. So if you are an avid reader, you're probably looking for those reviews, and then you're hopefully giving back to the community by leaving reviews to help out the next reader. So those are the kind of three groups that mainly need to use them, and the different rationales and reasoning why behind they do. So yeah, overall, if you're not leaving reviews, I highly recommend you do. It really helps the authors, it really helps the future readers. And another one to throw out right at the end is, if you are the friend or family member of an independent author who's just getting started and you don't think the book is stellar, but you think it's worth a 3-star review and you're afraid to leave it because you think it's going to hurt their feelings, just leave it. They're going to appreciate it, they're going to love it. I have a bunch of friends who told me that, like, oh, I loved your book, but I couldn't give it 5 stars, honestly, it just wasn't really my thing. I would have left you, 3 or 4 stars, but I thought it hurt your feelings. As I said in the past, 1 to 2 stars, like, yeah, that kind of hurts your feelings. That kind of crushes it, because if you think on a 100 scale, 2 stars is kind of like a 40% on a test. It's not really that good. But 3 stars still shows, in my opinion, that it's worthy of a read. It just might be catering to a niche market, maybe, or maybe it hit the mark a little bit of being perfect, but it's still worthy of a read. So if you are the friend or family member of a small author and you want to help them out in any way, give them a review. Don't lie, because if it sounds too fluffy and it sounds too perfect, whoever's monitoring the reviews on whatever site you're utilizing will probably detect it and maybe even search that person's Facebook or Twitter to see if you guys are friends, and they'll think like, oh, this person's just helping them out, or maybe it's a paid review or something. Don't lie, but also, just help them out. Reviews are great. The more reviews you have on a book, depending on the website, it works into the algorithm of how you're searched and how you're pushed out there. So if you have only a couple of reviews on a new book, you're not really going to get out there. But if you have 20, 30, 50, 100 reviews on there, now the system in the background is going to start thinking that this book is more popular and people are going to want to read it, and they're going to push it out there in advertising. So that's the last thing I really wanted to leave you with. So if you have any other questions or comments, hit me down in the comments, and we can have a discussion about this afterwards. If you like this kind of video, hit like. If you haven't already subscribed, I try to put out at least 1 video per week. It's been bouncing between videos like this about books and writing related topics, and then also my non-writing topics, like my helmet that I've been making and armor and stuff like that. So yeah, if you haven't already, please subscribe, hit the bell so you're notified when I have new stuff come up. Hopefully I'm entertaining you guys and providing some sort of knowledge and education. So yeah, thanks again for your time. I appreciate you sticking with me, and hope you have a good night. All right, thanks. Bye.